Hello.
Hi Peter, we're so pleased to be talking to you again. Now, the Zeitgeist movement, it's starting to be a runaway train, isn't it? It's really gathering momentum at the moment.
I hope so. I certainly like what I've seen.
Yes.
You know, there's so much great action and so many people that are so dedicated that the seeds have been planted, I think, and I look forward to seeing how things progress. I thought the event went very well.
Yes, well, we've just seen you do a fantastic talk, really putting things into detail.
Thanks.
I really just wondered where the spark of the Zeitgeist came from. What was the passion that started you off on this journey?
I guess ultimately we all have, well, most of us have an interest to see things function in some type of fairly good way, for lack of a better expression. I think all of us want to see, I think most people don't like to see crime and poverty, even though our values in the media certainly wouldn't suggest that. People, for some reason, they see movies about suffering and violence, and it's exciting, but yet I think they naturally are horrified when it happens to them personally. So invariably, the Zeitgeist movement is an attempt to do something to change all of the problems that we tend to see. My spark was actually inadvertent. It was a media project of the original film, which I think I had mentioned to you before. And essentially, I wanted to create an artistic expression that reflected certain values and awarenesses and gestures and challenged people. And ultimately, it invariably had to do with dishonesty. I think whether you call it corruption or whatever you want to label it. But there's a great deal of dishonesty amongst people. And that manifests in so many different ways. And the reason that sticks out to me is, why are they being dishonest? And there's a reason for that. And that was really the train of thought that led to the second film. First film sparked the kind of environment, people responded. The second film, Zeitgeist Addendum, started to address things that no one talks about. It's always about people, like this person did this and that person did that. Not this person did this because, or that person did this because. There's very little motivation in society to understand root causes of anything, unfortunately. So that's really what the movement's about at its cellular level, you know.
Now, so many people have come today to hear you speak, and they've come from far and wide, haven't they? From Germany.
They have
come. So
amazing.
People are very interested in what you are trying to achieve with this. Now, so many people, millions in fact, are on board with the message of what you are trying to do and the change you are trying to bring about. How do we progress that, or how does one progress that yourself? Because I know you don't want to be just the focal point of the Zeitgeist. You do want to spread this far and wide. So what would be your aims if you wanted to tell people to make this happen? Because I know you don't want to make this a money thing. You've made that very clear. And you were talking about maybe land being donated to start the project off. And what else would work?
Well, the project isn't just I don't think this is what you're suggesting, but you mentioned land and the start of the project. The project begins right now. It begins in the sense of human identification and a sort of value adaptation to something that actually would work in society. In other words, we can't create, say, a utopia, even though there's no such thing as a utopia. Even if you created a utopia in its structure, meaning that there was no such thing as there was abundance of everything in the utter extreme, like fantasy. If humans were just dropped into that environment as they exist today, they would still be killing each other. Because they wouldn't understand. It would take them a long time to adapt, and that's really the issue. It's a social therapy issue. That's really what the Zeitgeist movement is about more than anything else. It's not as much about, you know, the projects of technology and all the understandings are important to relay what's possible, but it's really about social therapy and making people question their values and question why they think their greedy mentality is supported and why they think that might be natural. And I think once people begin to understand that most of their ideas and most of their behavior is really manifest of what's been pushed upon them. We've been kind of like just pushed in different directions, and this direction will support your behavior, this direction will not. Altruism and things that doing things for no money, most people don't find that supportive because they can't really succeed in the material world that they live in, so they move towards environments that are less altruistic naturally because they need to make money, unfortunately. And that's the case for everybody, but everyone unfortunately has to survive. So the Zeitgeist movement is not to deny that, it's to point it out. and to relay that information and to show that this society, this civilization can be redesigned in a way that all of the attributes that tend to lead to dishonest behavior will no longer exist, and dishonesty will no longer be a viable issue. And again, that might sound utopianistic, but it's not in the sense of its train of thought. There's a reason why people do what they do, and that's really what the movement's about. Is again, social therapy. I say that a few times because I want people to think about that. We're shaping behavior constantly in everything that we do. If I do something offensive to somebody, and it's, well, all you have to do is look at the emotional scarring of people that have been abused. And like my mother used to be, well, she still does actually, she's retired now, but she still works in Child Protective Services. And and a lot of people give Child Protective Services a bad name. They say it's like against the family or something, like who are these people? But I've seen the horrors that happens from generations and generations of child abuse, generations and generations of molestation and sexual abuse. It's incredible to see the pattern, and it makes sense. Because you're just continuing the pattern. So something has to stop those patterns.
How do we just stop something like, which is terrible as child abuse? How do we just get that out of the system?
That's a very complex one. I have all the extremes that we talk about in the movement. Money is a big point as far as reinforcement of selfish and you know, just narrow, unenlightened self-interest, gratification. When it comes to difficult subjects, such as a man who gets jealous of a woman, or a woman who gets jealous of a man. What's the basis of that? It makes no sense.
Where does it come from?
Or, yeah, exactly. Or say a man who beats up another man for looking at his girlfriend the wrong way. Think of these sick, weird things, these jealousies and these arrogances. That where do they come from? And that's a very good question. I think they come from the system from many different levels, and I can't pretend to give you a definitive answer of where. But what I do know is that just as easily as they come in, is just as easy as they can go out. So if someone's educated enough in their youth, for example, instead of someone in kindergarten and first and second, third grade learning fairy tales, they begin to learn how to relate to each other. And once you begin that, I hate to say programming, but we are programmed machines in a lot of ways, then they'll grow up in a much more altruistic mentality. If they grow up with poor parents and an abusive alcoholic, drug addict father who has succumbed to those distinctions because of his poverty and his family's abuse, these chain reactions are all there. So arrogance, dominance, your competition, another great one. Why are people competitive? People say it's natural. It isn't really natural. First of all, scientifically, it's always better for somebody to work with somebody else. All the major... There's, of course, been great men who individually Albert Einstein, that can think, but he's building upon all of the information that was presented to him by all these scientists before him.
Building on giants' shoulders.
Precisely, the old Newton quote. This is precisely, and simultaneously, if you have a bunch of people in a meeting about a specific idea and they share their ideas, you're going to progress much more quickly than just one person competing and hiding their information from another person who's competing and hiding their information too. So back to my original point, competition makes no sense. So the reason it exists has to do with something else. I'm not saying that just because it doesn't make sense, it's not... it doesn't have a basis. We have to survive, and it doesn't have a biological basis. We have to survive. So you can say if two people are both deprived and they both see food, they're going to fight for it, therefore they're competing. But we want to eradicate the notion of competition by providing the goods and necessities, the necessities of life for people, so no one starves and no one is without all the simplistic modern conveniences that we all have.
Do you think we're on the path to doing this? Do you think it's happening, or do you think it's getting worse?
Right now it's getting worse.
So how do we
by far getting worse.
Turn it around?
Well,
because there is a problem with the finance system at the moment. It is in a very dodgy area.
Which is good in a way, because it's showing people the illusion a little bit more.
Yes.
The financial system is, again, based on a process that is unsustainable. It's all about money being created constantly, servicing debt and various requirements that the population needs. Excuse me. And the reality is that they have to keep making that money over and over and over again. Every country in the world has basically fiat-based currency. I can't think of, there's a few small islands that don't have this type of system. So, but ultimately all of their money supplies slowly go up over time. It doesn't, for some countries they're fairly well organized and it's very subtle. But when you stand back after 100 years, For example, in the United States, it's the curve of money supply.
Doesn't it?
And what is so magically it's just going to stop going up?
Exactly.
The reason is why is it going up? And that's because the system is based, the energy, the fuel of the system is consumption, the circulation of money, and the creation of money. And the banks which charge money at interest are automatically creating an inherent deficit. So money has to constantly be created. So I forgot my original point, though. But go ahead and ask your question.
I was just going to say, at the moment, in plain words, there does seem to be a gold rush on, and we see these adverts over here in England that they're wanting to buy your gold. So,
sure.
you know, people are selling their gold and they're getting money back.
Right.
So if the system crashes, people are left with nothing. So what do you know about, is that happening in the States?
Gold has always been a flight, an investment flight for when the dollar is bad and the economy goes bad. The dollar, if you track any currency, it tends to be inverse to gold. So if your currency is going down, then gold will go up. It's a psychological pattern based on the fact that gold is a legitimately valuable resource, based on what I understand. And it's generally scarce. Its utility, it has certain applications, but it's not really that applicable as far as what it can be used for. So it's basically psychology. Gold has value, and that's basically it. I mean, people are selling their gold because they can get currency for it. I think that's just equally as nonsensical. It doesn't mean anything. Obviously, people are doing what they have to survive. Gold standards, all of those things are equally as corrupt, because the value of gold is still determined subjectively. So even if you had a gold standard, which is a different topic of what you're talking about, you could still manipulate the value of the natural resource.
Now, in this future idea that you have within your movement and the Venus Project, we see this wonderful place of the circular cities, and we saw that on the programme. Now, if we could get to that kind of society, it would be fantastic. But the question I did want to ask was, when everything is done like that and is provided, and there's only a small workforce that does need to keep things ticking and working, how do you see people spending their time? What will they do?
That's always a common question. I think the value system as a society will be altered. I think we all have things that we like to do. I think you enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's not that you just have to do it for money. Many people, of course, are trapped in the world of being slaves, legitimately not having any appreciation for what they do, and legitimately so. I mean, there's plenty of people I meet. For example, I was walking down the street in New York the other day, going somewhere, and I saw him at a distance, a man with a little packet of brochures, and he was standing with his arm outstretched. He's handing out flyers, but he wasn't just actively doing it. He decided, you could tell because he'd been doing it forever, I think. I spoke with him very briefly. He wasn't mentally ill. This is his job. He decided to stick his arm out with like a stand, like a statue, and hold it out if anybody wants to pick it. This is his job.
So it was like mechanical.
Absolutely mechanical, waste of life.
Oh my God.
So you can't say that people have choices in what they do. That individual doesn't have a choice. There's a specific biosocial circumstance which has created him and forced him into a position of that lowest degrading common denominator of labor. And unfortunately, that's the reality. So if you were to... People now, unfortunately, don't even know what they would do for many of them because they've been so conditioned. And there's an example that Jacques told me that I really like. Many, many years ago on an island, you'd have women that would carry harnesses with water. And every day they go down with these, you see this in cultures still today, these harnesses they have, and they go to the river and they get water, put it on their backs like this, and they walk up to their hut or wherever, and that's where they use to cook. They make a fire. What if someone said to them, hey, you know what, one day we're going to have water that you just turn a faucet on, and you're never going to have to go down to that river ever again, which they did 3 times a day. The woman might respond, well, what will I do? Because that is the nature of our conditioning. If you don't have an awareness of what's possible, then you're trapped in a limited frame of mind. That's what our system does. We're constantly trapped in a very small frame of mind. Limited resources. You will limit your possibility, is what people are trapped into. Everyone's possibilities are limited and they can't see outside of it. I think people will do all sorts of incredible things. I think there will be a flourishment. Absolutely, they'll invent.
Yes,
they won't. They won't. Imagine right now if you took all of the military men on the planet, all of them. I don't even want to know. I don't want to think about the numbers. And you sent them all to school to become engineers and architects and technicians. Imagine how incredible the world might be. Or the other example I use in Addendum, imagine if all the guys that worked on the Manhattan Project, all of them instead worked on creating a sustainable environment, as opposed to a nuclear bomb, which kills people.
Exactly.
Imagine what the world might be.
It would be a lot better, wouldn't it?
People will do what is rewarding on whatever personal level. Sadly, to finish my point, that's been ripped out of people in this system.
Because people are so programmed, aren't they, into a slot, and when kids are growing up and when they're at school and they're being forced to study, and it's like, what are you going to be when you grow up? You have to be something, and they, at that age, they probably just have no idea, but they're forced into slots that they could be forced into being doctors, lawyers and Indian chiefs, and it could be so far from what they could be or should be.
Absolutely. People are, again, they're possibilities.
They're boxed, aren't they?
The older people get, it seems like they just get more and more narrow.
Yeah.
So you're fairly free as a child, as we hear people playing here, and there's a great creativity. And then you get to school, and then you have to decide. You realize you have to make money, and you get to college. So most people, when they go to college, they don't have a major. Then by like second or third year, they have to have a major. So they slowly narrow your possibility. It's based on the monetary system and nothing more.
Again, yes.
And then sadly, as a side, people value themselves based on their occupation. They brainwash themselves based on what they've been forced into.
And it's like you've got to have 6, 10 A-levels before you can get some kind of half-decent job. But there's so many people, or children come out of school and they find a way because they become inventive and creative, like myself.
Sure.
But I suppose other channels do open up when other channels are closed.
Yes. I think there are always exceptions, but I think that people like Nikola Tesla and Albert Einstein and these individuals don't have to be so few.
Yes.
I think they're not brilliant. They're brilliant. Jock dropped out of school at 14. His brilliance comes from his conditioning. He'll be the first to admit that. Brilliant mind, brilliant genetics too, probably to a certain degree, but he'll be the first to tell you that he has culminated his ideas. I've culminated my ideas. I'm not special. No one's special. There's no special. It's a ridiculous idea. And I think the possibilities for people, obviously there's a difference between somebody who has a severe learning disability that's has a problem.
Yes.
There's only so far you can go to help somebody usually, at least at this point in time, based on what we understand. But then most people are fairly cognitively secure, and they can learn fairly easily, and on average people, I think, can understand basic premises and can think creatively if the environment allows them to do so.
Okay.
So to answer your question, I think we could have many Da Vincis. Seriously, I think the possibility of each human being is tremendous. It's just been, most people are just so restricted, you know.
Do you feel with the Venus Project and the like, we have the technology already to do that? Could that just be done tomorrow?
Yes.
What you have in mind?
Based on what I understand, based on the resource and analysis, the work Jacques done, many things that he won't even tell people because he's had all of his stuff stolen from him throughout the years. He's had numerous inventions. He doesn't even care about the technology at this point, even though he has tremendously good things. What I mean by that is he's focused on the social aspect. Like I've said to him, well, why don't you do this and this, and maybe this will help this. He's like, well, that's partially relevant, but it's much more important to focus on the larger order social issue. And I completely agree with him. There's the first very base of our society is energy, and as I think was successfully relayed in Zeitgeist Addendum and is statistically proven, we can power this planet, its current population, and many times it's the population that exists now with the energy that we have, and we'll always find new energy.
I do believe that, yes, because one thing we do have is solar energy, and it's ample, isn't it?
It's simply a matter of the technology to figure out how to maximize the harm. There's new nanotechnology-based solar panels that are so small in their operation that they can really encapsulate, and their power is tremendous. So the next level is resources in general, minerals and all of those things. There's so much amazing, there's so many resources. Like here's an example. People say we have food problems, right? 1 billion people starving. Apparently we're running out of food. We don't have food.
I don't believe that
of course
for a
not.
second, actually.
Think about it this way. In the ocean there is epiphany of organic matter. If you take that organic matter, high in nutrients, I can't give you the specifics right now, I don't have it in front of me, but you can funnel all of that organic material into skyscrapers that have on every single level acre-size hydroponic rotation plants. You could build as many as you want on the entire edge of a particular coastline, which could produce probably enough food. I mean, you could have a farm on each floor. And it's really just a matter of what we decide to do. You could make a massive complex the size of nothing like you could ever imagine, which only grows vegetation for the entire North American region. And then you have automated systems that automatically create it, and it funnels out through transportation systems to each central hub of a community, and everyone gathers their produce. And so, you know...
When I'm in the car and I'm driving along the road, the motorway, and then I just look at all the different trees which could be producing fruit, or the hedgerows where there could be things growing, and I just think there's so much land where we could be producing food. And my friend and I, we've had an idea where in my garden I have 3 apple trees actually, and a pear tree, but I have so much fruit that I can't eat it all.
Sure.
I do what I can with it,
Oh,
but
yeah.
we've come up with an idea where we're going to do like a fruit share. So the fruit that we've got, we are going to give to people in our area, and if they've got something that they've got a surplus of, they'll give to us for free. So we're going to share the fruit.
Yes,
or
absolutely.
vegetables, whichever, if people have got too much of, so we can give it away.
I think it's amazing how inefficient the growth of vegetation growth is in smaller communities, because you will find that everyone I've ever known that has pear trees and apple trees, they have a bunch of waste.
Exactly.
It's like you just can't even eat it all. There's just so much of it.
That's why we're going to start a project.
That's
I don't
great.
know how we're going to do it. We're going to find somewhere once a week and take what fruit we've got through the growing season, through the autumn, and just take it and share it.
Yes.
And people can bring something back in return if they want to, if they have something.
Sure.
But I don't mind just giving it away rather than it just being
Absolutely. And back to the point that I made in the presentation earlier about the deliberate withholding of efficiency, that's exactly what the whole of society does. We have, for example, in the Great Depression, factories couldn't sell like milk. Instead of giving it to the people, they would just dump it all into the gutter.
I just hate things like that. In our area, for example, there is a fantastic group comes around and they do collect surplus fruit, and they're called Organically, and they take it and they give it out to community projects for free to, well, sort of people who can't afford too much food, so I think that's fantastic.
Yes.
I don't know if you have anything like that where you are.
There are similar smaller programs, and the effect is, of course, it's altruistic and beautiful, but the effect is so minimal. That's the unfortunate aspect of all of this, is that our activism at this stage, it can only go so far because of the established institutions that are in power. If an organization can't get enough money to do something because they're not making a profit, even if they're, quote, non-profit in the distinction that you have in the United States, they have an inherent limitation because, and of course, the more profit they get, this sort of paradox, they become established, and then it becomes corrupt very often. So it's an unfortunate side effect. There's a lot of brilliant volunteerism that happens all over the world, but it's not enough. Again, back to the other point, people donate small amounts of money to UNICEF and all of these organizations that promote, that go against poverty, and that's just the wrong idea. The idea is to make a structure to get them the food and the things that they need.
And to make them self-sufficient as well.
Yes, and to pull them out of that and put them into and create a society and a system that works. There's no reason for any of the poverty
like the
that we see.
hydroponics.
Absolutely.
Yes.
The hydroponic agriculture can be applied anywhere. Unfortunately, it's very expensive now because it's a technical thing.
Yes.
But the resources aren't complex. It's really not a complex process. I've seen hydroponic farms.
It?
You could have hydroponics in the desert. In certain deserts, you have to go. You have to have
drill into the
straight down to the desert. Exactly. Excuse me, to the water table.
Yes.
And it might be difficult. I think the Sahara, if I remember correctly, has a water table that's accessible. Okay. So there might be some deserts that it might be, again, but it's all a matter of degree and technology. If you have to go down a mile, that might seem dramatic, but if you can do it,
and
what's the problem?
And you feed thousands of people, it's worth it.
Yes, of course. And I don't even think you need to have that type of extremity. The industrialized world could easily, on top of what it produces now, produce enough to feed, clothe, and house every person in the unindustrialized nations. It's just a matter of the focus to do so.
Where do you see the Zeitgeist movement 1 year from now? Where would you like to see it?
I don't really think about it that way.
No?
I guess, well, where would I like to see it? Where I see it, I don't know. But where I'd like to see it, I suppose, would be a nice, organized system with pockets of memberships and activist working educational groups all over the planet hopefully relatively equidistant. So when you look at, say, a map of the planet, and you were to look at the population of those that are in the movement, you'd have these tremendous spots everywhere. And then slowly through time, it will emerge. The point being, slowly through time, that it will emerge, and everything will slowly come together. And the establishment will be absolutely horrified of all governments. All governments will say, what is going on? We've been trying to promote ourselves and keep our patriotism and keep our industries against all these other damn governments. Now we have this sub-movement that wants to unify the world and have the world work together. And it's going to be difficult from that angle. But the beauty of this approach, the way I see it, is that it is less susceptible to the type of horrors that we see that the establishment does. If there was ever an act of violence by a government against the Zeitgeist movement, other governments.
I was going to ask you about that, actually.
Other governments, this entire pool of people can jump into action, and the problem is the numbers necessary for that are quite extreme. You can't just do it with a couple hundred people in each city. It has to be a substantial relative amount of people. I hope it doesn't have to work out like that. I hope in some way that eventually these things will click, and you'll eventually get people that are fairly high up in the established structure to finally get turned around. And begin it so it doesn't have to be this utter, overthrow. I hate to think about it that way.
People are looking at you as some kind, I don't want to say saviour, that's totally the wrong word.
No.
But really, for someone to start a new structure, and people who've done that in the past, some of them have come to a bit of a sticky end.
Well, sure, I think.
Are you worried that
I'm strategically countering that possibility because of the way that I'm trying to organize it as a global structure. And hopefully in 1 year from now, there will be other people like me. I have a thing on my site that's a lecture circuit, which I'm constructing, which will not just be me or Jacques or Roxanne. It will be anyone that learns this information to a high enough degree where they can go out and they can have events like this. And people will respect it, and they will become representatives. Everyone is a representative in some way. At least that's the way I like to think about it. It's the way I encourage people to think about themselves. It's too easy to pawn it off on some leader, some supposed leader, and that's a tendency people have too. Yes. They don't want to do anything, and they just pawn it off on somebody else, and that's definitely dangerous. But to take out anybody in the higher echelon of, say, any kind of movement, if the movement is holographic and to the extent where there's just people everywhere, then there's not even going to be a motivation to do so. So that's the balance that has to occur. I need a team of people, and I have a good number of them in different countries now. I'd say there's about 12 or 15 centralized groups that are doing autonomous things, and I think I well respect what they're doing. They seem to be on track, and they're in charge of their area, so to speak. So I think, and hopefully eventually it'll be
the way things are going.
I suppose it could be better, but it's a difficult learning threshold, and it's
a start, isn't
it? Yeah, and the organization, of course, as you can imagine, is very, very, very hard. Even just the website organization about how to deal with groups and figure out the most what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry, I'm a bit tired today.
I know.
The most relevant and logical way to do something, the easiest way, the path of least resistance to get an organization like this together is a massive mental conundrum.
Yes.
Because if you're dealing with a global activist community, so to speak, it has so many different variables and so many different people, and so this is an ongoing process. But to answer your question, I'm fairly happy with it.
Your goal is true, and what you're trying to bring off is such a wonderful project.
I think so.
And I think something like this is going to take time, but we do hope that this is going to happen in the future.
And again, it's an attitude. People shouldn't be too high-strung about it.
Yes.
They should be serious about it. But I get a little discouraged when I meet people that are far too gung-ho.
Yes.
And because it can't work like that. You have to you live your life, and you have to look at this as a larger order project. You have to think about it in the way the early stonemasons built the huge cathedrals, where it took generations to build these massive, they accepted that. So they knew they weren't going to see the end of this cathedral by the time that they died. And while I don't like to throw out rhetoric that none of this can happen in one lifetime, I think, generally speaking, when it comes to value adaptations, it might take a lot longer than that. Doesn't mean we can't create a new society in the meantime that can solve a good amount of the problems and begin the transition.
Well, I think people are trying, aren't they? Because they're building solar energy and panels and wave energy and tidal energy.
Luckily, it's become a fad, oddly enough, There is a thing happening where the people, they realize there's problems in the environment. So you have all these companies promoting green ideas, green products. They're not really green if you look closely at most of them. But nevertheless, it's great because it's showing that the public is becoming somewhat aware. And even if people are coming aware, even if there's certain environmental problems that aren't as relevant as people make them out to be, regardless, it's planting a seed for people to start understanding that they are interconnected with the environment. An obvious truth that unfortunately most people have, like most obvious truths, they're the most profound, and they're the most lost, it seems. But
if one person could make a difference, what would you suggest that they would do?
That's a very tough question. You have to become a part of the community. Singularly, you have to. It's not a matter of just individuals doing something. It's a matter of working together in a way that begins to affect the environment that they're in.
Like sharing the fruit.
Sure, that's a great idea. I think simply everyone has different thresholds of what they're capable of doing as far as time. I've been fortunate to have enough time to come and do these things. Other people have 9-to-5s every day and they can't do stuff like that. So what they would do, I recommend, is educate in whatever way you possibly can and simultaneously begin to reject the value system of the current establishment and eventually reject the system in any way you can. So for example, in the Zeitgeist Addendum, I say, don't support the dominant energy structures. Go off, if you live in a rural area and you can do it through time, make your home completely self-sufficient. Yes. Reject the established monetary consumption. There's an idea called a time bank, which I mentioned earlier.
Oh, yes.
And what that would do, I can see there's complexity to that, which I won't go into right now, but if people did volunteer and barter their actions in service, the great thing about that, apart from the altruism, is that it would hurt the establishment and hurt the economy, which of course is both good and bad, because people do rely on the economy, and eventually people would suffer because of that. In other words, there's a threshold to how far you can reject the system before people get hurt. And that's an unfortunate reality. So it's just one of those things that...
it's bridging the gap, isn't it?
Yes, I'm not an advocation of some kind of monstrous breakdown and anarchy and all this suffering, even though, unfortunately, to a certain degree, that's what brings a lot of social change historically.
Yes.
I think that if enough people are willing to learn and educate and understand and then put pressure, I use the word pressure, on the social environment and show the power that they have. Acts of social rejection against the establishment, that would be a great way to move forward. So,
because someone did ask you the question, didn't they? Like, do we need some kind of really big event to happen before we do change the system, or could it be done gradually?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something I might address in the new film, or I will address in the new film, because there is an avenue, believe it or not, that could be gradual. And that's been talked about for about 150 years. And it's this gradual using technology to replace human labor, increasing the wages, just strategically. But the more you think about that gradual, step-by-step implementation of automation and abundance creation, you see that it invariably goes against the grain of those that are running the show because of the profit structure. Because you're invariably eliminating their elitism slowly. So not only are you eliminating all the problems, you're eliminating the elite. Yes. So there's only so far you might be able to go with an approach like that. And
you're going to ruffle a few feathers.
Yes, but there are certain areas.
You are ruffling feathers.
There are certain areas that could happen. Like you have socialized healthcare in the UK. Why not socialize energy? Why not set up an automation system, get rid of all the energy companies, and set up an automation system that can produce an abundance of energy for everyone, and no one ever has to pay for it? That would be an altruistic step.
I think that would be wonderful.
I wouldn't be opposed to that. It would, of course, be in the monetary system to a certain degree, but this is why, and you say that though, but unfortunately people then say, wait a minute, that's communism or that's state-owned and that's inherently negative because they've been brainwashed in this idea. And there is a problem with those notions.
But I think it will come to a point, Peter, because bills are going up all the time and people just can't keep up. So something's got to change.
I hope so. I hope so, yeah. I mean, the change really comes... I think the establishment can maintain a lot longer than most people think. It has done so for quite a while. This revolution should have occurred after the Great Depression. The Great Depression didn't have the advancement of technology, but it had the foresight of the advancement of technology. But something happened, and then, it just, the system it just slams down, and then it comes back up. Everything things are great, slams down. People get upset, and then slowly they're placated again. And I think, as much as I talk about the collapse of the system due to technological unemployment, if the people don't understand the possibilities, they could still salvage the system. You're still going to have outrageous poverty and corruption. People just become more accustomed to it. They'll begin to think that there's too many people on the planet. They'll say, "Ooh, poverty is just the way it is."
Said quite a few times.
Yeah, that's a scapegoat for people.
Very scary.
Yeah, that's an utter scapegoat. Because people that say that, they've never done any analysis. They don't, and the politicians that put that forward, it's an utter scapegoat. It's nonsensical, and it certainly makes no sense. Back to your original point, each individual person just needs to figure out how to engage their environment in the best way they can, specifically those that don't understand the movement, don't understand the ideas. I don't even care about the movement. It's just present the ideas and get people to want to understand and relay that train of thought to others, and hopefully a new value system will emerge where people will look at the world from the standpoint of the possibilities and get out of all of the classist and even racist and all these annoying things that keep being perpetuated. Yeah, and the dualities and the good and evil and all of these things. So something can happen with the value system, very profound, even without the implementation. It can only go so far because of the reinforcement of the system, but we'll see.
Well, I certainly think you've planted the seed.
Well, thank you.
Seeds now, so have a wonderful time making this work.
Oh, we'll see what happens.
I wish you all the best.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Have a good one.